My name does not matter right now. What matters is this moment. I was standing in my own living room, shaking, while 3 people smiled at me like I was nothing. Papers were spread across the table. A pen lay right in front of my wrinkled hand. "Just sign here," one of them said softly, pretending to care. "It's for your own good." My heart was beating fast, but I kept my head down. They thought I was scared. They thought I was weak. They thought I was just a helpless old woman who did not understand what was happening. They were wrong. Because the moment my pen touched that paper was the moment I decided to use their greed against them, and teach them a lesson they would never forget. But before I tell you how I did that, let me ask you something. If you enjoy emotional, powerful stories like this one, please take a second to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. And tell me in the comments which country you are watching from. I really want to know who is here with me today. Now listen carefully, because what happened next changed everything. I looked at the paper again. Big words. Legal words. The kind of words people use to confuse someone like me. Or at least, someone they thought was like me. "You don't need to read all that," one of them said quickly. "We already explained it." I nodded slowly, like I didn't understand. My hands trembled on purpose. I even let my glasses slide down my nose. Inside my chest, my heart was calm. I signed. The room felt quiet for 1 second. Then I heard a deep breath of relief. Someone smiled too wide. Someone else quickly gathered the papers, afraid I might change my mind. That was the moment the trap closed. But they didn't know it yet. Let me take you back. A few months earlier, I was living a simple life. I am old, yes. My hair is gray. My back hurts when I stand too long. But my mind is sharp. I raised my children with love and pain. I worked my whole life. I saved every little thing. And after my husband passed away, all that was left, my house, my land, my savings, was still in my name. That made some people very uncomfortable. It started with visits. At first, they came with smiles and food. "How are you feeling today? Do you need anything? You shouldn't be alone at your age." They talked slowly to me, like I was a child. They spoke over me. They made decisions without asking. I noticed everything. Then the real talk started. "You know," one of them said one evening, "this house is too big for you. Managing money is stressful," another added. "You deserve peace." Peace. That word sounded sweet. But behind it, I smelled greed. Soon, they started talking about papers. About moving things, for safety. About signing documents, just in case. I said no. That was when their tone changed. They sighed loudly. They rolled their eyes. They whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. "She doesn't know what's best for her anymore. She's too old to understand." They were already counting what they believed would soon belong to them. That night, I sat alone in my room and thought hard. I could fight them openly. Yell. Argue. Cry. But that would only make them push harder. Instead, I chose something else. I chose to let them believe I was exactly who they thought I was. So I became quiet. I asked the same questions again and again. I forgot things they told me. I acted confused. Their confidence grew. They started making plans right in front of me. They talked about selling things. About dividing money. About what they would do after. All while I sat there, nodding. One day one of them said, "We should get this done soon. Before something happens." Something. Like death. That was when I knew the time was right. I told them I was tired. That my head hurt. That maybe they were right. Their eyes lit up. They brought the papers the very next day. And that brings us back to the table. The pen. The smiles. They watched my hand as I signed. What they didn't know was this. I had already spoken to someone else. I had already made arrangements. And those papers. They were not what they thought they were. I slid the pen back and whispered, "I hope this makes everyone happy." "Oh, it will," one of them said quickly. They left my house that day feeling rich already. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, breathing slowly. Outside, they were celebrating. Inside, I smiled for the first time in months. Because the lesson had already begun. And very soon, they were going to realize just how badly they had underestimated a helpless old woman. But what exactly did I sign? And what would happen when they tried to take what they thought was now theirs? That is where things get dangerous. They did not even wait until they reached the gate before they started smiling and whispering to each other. I watched them through the small window beside my door. Their steps were light. Their shoulders were relaxed. To them, the future already belonged to them. I locked the door slowly. Then I laughed. Not loud. Just a small laugh that came from deep inside my chest. "You think I'm finished," I whispered to myself. "But you have no idea." That night, I could not sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I was thinking. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word they had said to me in the past months. Every fake smile. Every time they spoke around me instead of to me. They really believed age meant weakness. They believed gray hair meant a gray mind. They believed kindness meant stupidity. They were wrong on all counts. I got out of bed and walked slowly to my small desk. I opened a drawer and took out a folder. Inside it were copies of documents, notes written in my shaky-looking handwriting, and one phone number written clearly on top. I had planned this carefully. Because when people think you are weak, they stop watching you. And when they stop watching you, that is when you move. The next morning, the phone rang early. I answered slowly, pretending I had just woken up. "Good morning," a cheerful voice said. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, dear," I replied softly. "I was thinking a lot." "Oh," the voice said, sounding nervous for just 1 second. "About what?" "About how lucky I am," I said. "To have people who care so much." There was a pause. Then laughter. Fake, loud laughter. "That's what family is for," the voice said. Family. That word used to mean something to me. Now, it tasted bitter. Over the next few days, they came often. Too often. They checked the house. They looked through rooms they had never entered before. They spoke openly on the phone while sitting right beside me. "I think we can start soon," one of them said one afternoon, covering the phone with their hand but not enough. I sat in my chair, knitting slowly, counting stitches. 1, 2, 3. I heard numbers too. Money numbers. Dates. Plans. They did not notice my fingers stopped shaking. They did not notice my eyes watching everything. One evening, I decided to test them. "I feel tired lately," I said quietly while we ate dinner. "Very tired." All heads turned toward me at once. "Tired how?" one asked quickly. "I don't know," I said, lowering my voice. "Sometimes I forget things. Sometimes I feel scared." They exchanged glances. The room felt tight. "That's normal at your age," one of them said too fast. "Nothing to worry about." Another nodded. "You're safe. Everything is taken care of now." Taken care of. Yes. It was. Just not in the way they thought. That night, I made another call. My voice was calm. Clear. "I need you to be ready," I said. "Things are moving faster than I expected." The voice on the other end answered, "Don't worry. Everything is in place." I hung up and sat in silence. Outside, the wind blew hard against the windows. It sounded like warning. A week later, they brought new news. "We found someone interested," one of them announced proudly. "Interested in what?" I asked. "The property," they said, trying to sound gentle. "It's better to act fast." I looked down at my hands. Oh, I whispered. Already? Yes, another said. You won't have to worry about anything. They leaned closer, watching my face carefully. I gave them what they wanted. Tears. I just want peace, I said. I trust you. The relief in their eyes was almost ugly. That was the moment I knew they had gone too far to turn back. From that day on, things changed. They stopped pretending. They spoke sharply when I asked questions. They got angry when I moved slowly. They corrected me in front of others. Sit down. Don't touch that. Leave it, I'll handle it. I was no longer a person to them. I was an obstacle waiting to disappear. Still, I stayed quiet. Because storms are loud at the end, not the beginning. Then came the visit. They did not tell me someone else was coming. I was sitting in the living room when I heard unfamiliar footsteps. Strong footsteps. Confident footsteps. A stranger walked in and looked around my house like it already belonged to them. This is it? The stranger asked. Yes, one of them replied quickly. Everything is settled. The stranger turned to me and smiled politely. Nice to meet you, they said. You won't be here much longer, right? The room spun. Not because I was weak, but because they had shown their hand too soon. I smiled back slowly. I suppose not, I said. Inside, my heart was racing. This was happening faster than planned. Too fast. That night, I did not sleep at all. I sat in the dark, listening to the house breathe. This house had heard my laughter, my crying, my prayers. And now, strangers were counting its walls. I stood up and made a decision. Tomorrow, the lesson would begin to show itself. Not fully. Just enough to shake them. The next morning, I acted different. I asked sharp questions. I remembered dates. I corrected someone's mistake. They noticed. What's wrong with you today? One asked, half joking. Nothing, I said calmly. I'm just thinking clearly. The air changed. Suspicion crept into their eyes. Good. Let them feel a little fear. Later that day, a message arrived. One short sentence. IT has started. I read it twice. My hands trembled again, but this time, not from fear. From excitement. Because very soon, their smiles would fade. Their plans would twist. And the greed they used against me would turn into the very thing that destroyed them. But before the truth could fully come out, they made one final move. A move that would force everything into the open. And when I realized what they were about to do, my breath caught in my throat. Because this time, they were not just trying to take my home. They were trying to erase me. And that is where this chapter must stop. Because what they did next was unforgivable. The morning it happened, I knew something was wrong before anyone said a word. The house felt different. Too quiet. No greetings. No fake smiles. No good morning spoken too loudly. I sat in my chair by the window and waited. When you live long enough, you learn to listen to silence. Silence always speaks first. Then I heard them whispering. Not caring if I heard or not. She doesn't need to know yet. Just do it today. If she asks questions, tell her later. My fingers tightened around the arm of the chair. Later. Later meant never. I stood up slowly and walked toward the hallway. My knees hurt, but my steps were steady. When I reached the door, I saw it. A suitcase. Not packed by me. Packed for me. My clothes folded roughly. Shoes pushed inside like they were trash. Personal things mixed together without care. Things that held my memories treated like junk. What is this? I asked. They all turned at once. The smiles came back. Thin. Nervous. Oh, one of them said, waving a hand. We were just organizing. Organizing where? I asked calmly. For you, another said. It's temporary. Temporary. That word again. Where am I going? I asked. No one answered right away. That told me everything. They sat me down like a child. We've been talking, one of them began. And we think it's best if you stay somewhere else for a while. Somewhere else. I repeated. Yes, another said quickly. Just until everything is finalized. Finalized. My heart beat once. Hard. And where is this somewhere else? I asked. They avoided my eyes. A place where you'll be taken care of, one said. Taken care of. The same words they always used. I looked around my living room. My curtains. My pictures. My husband's chair in the corner. This was not care. This was removal. You are moving me out of my own house, I said slowly. They sighed like I was being difficult. Please don't make this hard, one said. You can't live alone anymore. I've lived alone for years, I replied. Yes, but now things are different, another snapped. Different because of them. They did not wait for my answer. Two of them picked up the suitcase. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Quietly. Dangerously. I am not going anywhere, I said. They froze. The room went still. Then one of them laughed. Oh, you don't really have a choice, they said. That laugh. That was when I knew this was no longer about money alone. This was about control. They brought a car to the front. They told me to hurry. They told me I was being stubborn. They told me it was for my own good. I stood in the doorway and looked at them. I want my papers, I said. What papers? One asked. The ones I signed, I said. Another laughed. Those are already handled. Then show them to me, I said. Silence. They did not have them. They did not want me to see them. Because if I saw them, I would smile. And they could not allow that. That was when the shouting started. You're confused. You don't understand. You're making things worse. Neighbors began to look. I felt their eyes on my back. Shame. They wanted me to feel small. So I did something unexpected. I raised my voice. I am not confused, I said clearly. This is my house. They stared at me. I could see fear flicker for a second. But then it was gone. One of them leaned close to my ear and whispered, You signed it. You're done. That whisper was poison. They pushed me gently. Not enough to bruise. Enough to warn. I stumbled. On purpose. I let myself fall against the wall. I gasped. Oh, I said weakly. My heart. They panicked. Not because they cared. Because witnesses were watching. Sit her down, one said. Get her water. I sat. I waited. I watched. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. Later that day, when the house was quiet again, they left me alone. Too confident. Too sure. They thought the worst was over. They were wrong. I reached into my pocket and touched my phone. Still there. Still working. I typed one sentence. They tried to move me today. The reply came fast. Good. That means they're desperate. I smiled. That evening, someone knocked on the door. Not softly. Firmly. Confidently. They rushed to answer it. I stayed seated. I listened. New voices. Serious voices. Good evening, one of them said. We need to speak with everyone here. The room went cold. One of them looked back at me. I met their eyes. For the first time, they did not look powerful. They looked scared. The questions started. Who owns this property? Why is there a suitcase packed for her? Why was she told to leave? They talked over each other. They lied. Badly. I waited. Then I spoke. I invited them, I said softly. Every head turned toward me. I asked them to come, I continued, because I was afraid. The room froze. Afraid of what? The serious voice asked. I took a deep breath. Being erased. No one laughed. No one spoke. The silence was heavy, dangerous. Because now, the truth was standing in the room with us. And it was not leaving quietly. One of them suddenly shouted, "She's lying." But the damage was done. Because the next question would change everything. And when it was asked, there would be no going back. That question comes next. The question came quietly. So quietly that at first, I almost missed it. "Ma'am," the serious voice said, turning fully toward me, "can you tell us exactly what you mean by being erased?" The room stopped breathing. I felt every eye on me. The people who thought they owned my future stood stiff, their faces tight, their mouths slightly open. They were waiting for me to say the wrong thing, to sound confused, to prove their story true. I did not rush. I folded my hands in my lap and lifted my head. "When you live long enough," I said slowly, "you learn when people stop seeing you as human and start seeing you as a problem." No one interrupted me. "That suitcase," I continued, pointing toward the hallway, "was packed without my permission. I was told I had no choice. I was told I signed my life away." One of them stepped forward quickly. She agreed to everything. She signed. "I will speak," the serious voice said firmly. That shut them up. I looked straight ahead. My voice did not shake. "I was not confused," I said. "I was not sick. I was not asked. I was decided for." Silence fell again. Heavy. Thick. One of the serious voices cleared their throat. "Do you feel unsafe here?" That word landed hard. Unsafe. I looked around my living room. "I feel hunted," I said. That did it. The room exploded. "What kind of nonsense is this?" "She's exaggerating. She's always been dramatic." They spoke all at once, voices overlapping, panic bleeding through their anger. The serious voices raised a hand. "Enough." The room froze again. "Who packed her belongings?" one asked. No answer. I asked a question. Slowly, one of them raised a hand. "I did," they said. "But it was for her own." "Why?" The serious voice cut in. They hesitated. "That hesitation," the voice said calmly, "is very interesting." I almost smiled. They separated us. They asked me to stay seated while they spoke to the others in the kitchen. I could hear muffled voices, sharp whispers, low arguments. "She didn't tell us she called anyone. She tricked us. Just stay calm." I leaned back in my chair. Tricked them. No. I simply stopped protecting them. One of the serious voices came back and sat across from me. "Ma'am," they said gently, "we need to understand something. You mentioned papers. Documents you signed." "Yes," I said. "Do you remember what they were?" "Yes." They raised an eyebrow. "What were they?" I looked at them and said, "Not what they think." The voice paused. "What do they think they are?" "They think I signed everything away," I said. "My house. My land. My money." "And what did you actually sign?" I leaned forward slightly. "A mirror." They frowned. "A mirror." "Yes," I said. "A reflection of their greed." They looked confused, but curious. "Can you explain that?" "Soon," I said. "Very soon." The serious voices left again. Minutes passed. The people in the kitchen grew louder. "I told you we moved too fast. She's playing games. She's old, not stupid." That last sentence made my chest tighten. Old, not stupid. They were finally learning. Then the door opened again. "We need to see the documents," one of the serious voices said. The room went silent. One of them cleared their throat. "There, not here." Where are they? With our lawyer, they said quickly. Which lawyer? The voice asked. They gave a name. The serious voices exchanged a look. That lawyer has been retired for 3 years, one said. The color drained from their faces. That was the first real crack. They tried to recover. There must be a mistake, one said. She's confused. I laughed softly. Then ask him, I said. Ask who? The serious voice asked. The person who prepared the papers, I replied. Silence. Who prepared the documents, ma'am? They asked me. I smiled. I did. The room erupted. You what? That's impossible. She's lying again. I raised my hand slowly. I said I prepared them. With help. The serious voices leaned in. With whose help? I took a deep breath. With someone who does not like greedy people, I said. Someone who reads every line. One of them shouted. She forged everything. I looked at them calmly. If I forged anything, I said, you wouldn't be this scared. No one argued with that. The serious voices made a call. They stepped outside. The front door closed. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavy. One of them turned to me, eyes burning. You planned this, they said. Yes, I replied. You made us look bad. You made yourselves look bad, I said quietly. They clenched their fists. You think you're clever, another said. But you're alone. I looked up at them. No, I said. I'm prepared. The door opened again. The serious voices returned. This time, they were not alone. Another person walked in. Someone I recognized. Someone they did not expect. The moment they saw that face, the shouting stopped. The smiles vanished. The confidence collapsed. One of them whispered, "Why are they here?" I leaned back in my chair and folded my hands again. Because now, the trap was fully visible. And the next word spoken in that room would decide who walked out free. And who would never look at greed the same way again. When that person stepped into the room, the air changed instantly. No one spoke. No one even breathed properly. The people who had been standing tall just minutes ago suddenly looked smaller. Their shoulders dropped. Their eyes darted around the room like trapped animals looking for a way out. One of them whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "This can't be happening." But it was happening. And it was happening because they had pushed too far. The newcomer did not rush. They closed the door calmly behind them and looked around the room. Their eyes did not land on the others first. They came straight to me. "Are you all right?" they asked. "Yes," I answered. "I am." That was all they needed to hear. They turned slowly to face the rest of the room. "I've reviewed everything," they said evenly. "Every document. Every signature. Every attempt." One of them jumped in quickly. "She's manipulating you. She's old. She doesn't understand what she signed." The newcomer raised a hand. "She understands perfectly," they said. "That's the problem." The serious voices exchanged looks again. "What exactly did she sign?" one asked. The newcomer opened a folder. "Not a transfer," they said. "Not ownership papers. Not power of attorney." The room leaned in. "She signed a conditional agreement," they continued. "One that only activates if certain behaviors occur." My heart beat once. Steady. Calm. One of them laughed nervously. "That doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," the newcomer replied. "If you had read it." They flipped a page. "This document states that if any party attempts to remove her from her home, restrict her access, or make decisions without her consent, all assets are immediately locked." Locked. The word fell like thunder. "What?" someone shouted. "No," another yelled. "That's not possible." The newcomer nodded. "It is. And it already happened." The room exploded. You tricked us. This is fraud. She set us up. I stayed silent. Let them talk. Let them drown in their own noise. One of them turned on me, face red. You planned this from the beginning. Yes, I said simply. You let us believe. I let you show who you really are, I replied. The serious voices stepped forward. So to be clear, one said, the moment they packed her belongings without consent. The agreement triggered, the newcomer finished. Everything froze. Another serious voice asked, including property and funds? All of it, they said. No sales. No transfers. No access. Someone dropped into a chair. Another clutched their head. The greed that once made them confident was now choking them. This isn't fair, one shouted. I looked at them. Neither was what you did, I said. You used my age against me, I continued. You spoke over me. You planned my disappearance. They tried to interrupt me. The serious voices stopped them. Let her speak, one said. I took a breath. I raised children. I buried a husband. I built this life piece by piece, I said. And you saw it as easy money. Their eyes dropped. Some in anger. Some in shame. But it's not over, one of them said suddenly, looking hopeful. If the assets are locked, they can be unlocked. Yes, the newcomer agreed. They can. Their eyes lit up. How? One asked quickly. With her permission, the newcomer said, turning to me. Every face turned toward me again. The power in that moment was heavy, dangerous. I stood up slowly. I will not give permission today, I said. They groaned. But, I added, I will listen. Their heads snapped up. Listen to what? One asked. To the truth, I said. No lies. No pretending. The room went quiet. One of them spoke first. We were scared, they said. Scared of losing everything. I nodded. You were not losing anything. Another spoke. We thought you didn't notice. I smiled faintly. I noticed everything. Another tried. We were just trying to help. That is the lie, I said. And you know it. Tears formed in one person's eyes. Not because of me. Because of themselves. The serious voices spoke again. There will be an official review, one said. For now, no one is leaving. The word leaving hit hard. They looked trapped. Just like they had planned for me. As the night dragged on, the house felt different. Safer. Stronger. The people who thought they owned me now sat quietly, waiting for decisions they no longer controlled. I walked to the hallway and looked at the suitcase still sitting there. I bent down and closed it. Then I turned back to the room. This stays here, I said. No one argued. Because now they understood something very important. I was never helpless. I was patient. And patience, when mixed with greed, becomes a weapon. But the lesson was not finished yet. Because what they did next, after realizing they had lost control, would show just how dangerous desperate people can be. Desperation has a smell. It is sharp, sour, heavy in the air. I could smell it the moment they realized waiting would not save them. The house had gone quiet, but it was not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind that hides thoughts people are too afraid to say out loud. They sat in different corners of my living room, no longer whispering, no longer arguing. Each one of them was lost inside their own fear. Fear does strange things to greedy people. It makes them reckless. The serious voices left just before midnight. This is not over, one of them said to me quietly. We will return. I know, I replied. They looked at me carefully, as if seeing me for the first time. You were very brave today, they said. I was very prepared, I corrected. They nodded and left. The door closed. And just like that, I was alone with them. No witnesses. No authority. Just truth and fear sitting in the same room. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then one of them laughed. Not a happy laugh. A sharp one. "You think you've won," they said. I looked at them calmly. "I think you've shown yourselves," I replied. "That agreement can be challenged," they snapped. "We'll find a way." "I'm sure you will try," I said. Another leaned forward, eyes dark. "And what if we don't wait?" The threat hung in the air. I did not flinch. "What are you suggesting?" I asked. They smiled. A smile I had never seen before. "You're old," they said quietly. "Things happen to old people." The room went cold. That was the moment the mask fell completely. I stood up slowly. "You have already made one mistake tonight," I said. "Do not make another." They laughed again. "You can't prove anything," one said. I reached into my pocket and pressed a button on my phone. A small red light blinked. "I don't need to prove," I said. "I only need to record." Silence. Fear flashed across their faces. I had not even started recording. But they did not know that. They backed off. Just a little. Enough to show weakness. I sat down again. "I gave you chances," I said. "You ignored them." One of them rubbed their face. "We didn't think you would fight back." "That was your second mistake," I replied. Later that night, they tried another approach. Kindness. They brought me tea. They spoke softly. They apologized. "We went too far," one said. "We were under pressure." I took the cup. I did not drink. "Pressure does not create greed," I said. "It reveals it." Their eyes dropped. By morning, exhaustion had set in. Red eyes. Shaky hands. Quick tempers. That is when desperation turned into planning. I overheard them whispering. "We need leverage. She can't stay alone. If she slips." I closed my eyes. They were still thinking the same way. Still underestimating me. Around noon, one of them made a call. They thought I was asleep. "I don't care how," they whispered. "Just make it happen." My chest tightened. This was no longer about property. This was about survival. I went to my room and locked the door. I sat on my bed and took a deep breath. Then I made a call of my own. "I need help," I said. "Now." The reply was immediate. "Stay where you are," the voice said. "Do not confront them." I looked at the door. "They are planning something," I said. "I know," the voice replied. "That's why we're coming." Time slowed. Every sound felt louder. Footsteps. Whispers. Doors opening and closing. I held my phone tightly. This was the dangerous part of the lesson. The part where greedy people realize they have nothing left to lose. Suddenly, the door handle moved. Slowly. Carefully. Someone was trying not to make noise. My heart pounded. I did not move. The handle stopped. Then footsteps moved away. I released a breath I didn't know I was holding. Moments later. Sirens. Close. Very close. Shouts from outside. The front door burst open. "Everyone stay where you are." Chaos filled the house. They shouted. They cried. They blamed me. I stayed seated on my bed, calm. Safe. Later, when the house was quiet again, one of the serious voices sat across from me. "You did the right thing," they said. "I did the necessary thing," I replied. They nodded. "We heard everything," they said. Everything. That word felt heavy. Final. As they led the others away, one of them turned and looked at me with hatred. "This isn't over," they said. I met their eyes. "For you," I said. "It is just beginning." But the lesson still had one more chapter to teach. Because power does not end with fear. It ends with truth. And the truth was about to come out in a way no one expected. Morning came slowly, like the house itself was tired. Sunlight slipped through the curtains and fell across the living room floor. For the first time in many days, there were no whispers, no footsteps moving carefully, no voices plotting behind doors. The silence was real this time. I sat at the dining table with a cup of tea, my hands steady. The house felt like it belonged to me again. Not because it always had, but because I had fought for it. Outside, cars were parked along the street. Neighbors peeked through their curtains. Word had already spread that something serious had happened during the night. And they were right. Later that morning, the serious voices returned. This time, they were calm, organized, focused. They sat across from me, papers neatly stacked, expressions unreadable. "We need to talk about what happens next," one of them said. I nodded. I was expecting that. They glanced at each other. "What you did," another said, "was not just clever. It was necessary." "I know," I replied. "But now," the voice continued, "everything will come into the open." That was the part one had been waiting for. They began to explain. The recording, the messages, the phone calls, the attempted removal, the threats whispered in the dark. All of it had been documented. "All of it paints a very clear picture," one of them said. "Not just of greed, but of intent." Intent. That word made my chest tighten. "You mean they planned to hurt me?" I said. "Yes," the voice answered without hesitation. I closed my eyes for a moment. Even though I had known, hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a different way. "They stopped seeing you as a person," the voice continued. "They saw you as an obstacle." I opened my eyes. "That is the danger of greed," I said quietly. They nodded. Then came the question I knew would come. "What do you want to do now?" The room went still. I thought carefully. "I want the truth told," I said. "Not whispered. Not hidden." They listened closely. "I want everyone to know what really happened," I continued. "Not because I want revenge, but because silence is how this happens again." One of them wrote something down. "There will be hearings," they said. "Statements. Records." "I will speak," I said. Clearly. They nodded again. That afternoon, someone unexpected asked to see me. One of them. They were allowed inside, supervised. They looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. Broken. They sat across from me, hands shaking. "I never thought it would go this far," they said. "That is what everyone says," I replied. "We just wanted security," they whispered. "You wanted control," I corrected. "There is a difference." They looked up at me, eyes wet. "You could still help us," they said. "You could fix this." I studied their face. "Tell me," I said. "If I had been weaker, would you have stopped?" They opened their mouth, then closed it. That was my answer. "No," I said gently. "This is where I stop helping." They cried then. Real tears. Not because they were sorry, because they were caught. As days passed, the story spread. People I had not seen in years called me, visited, asked questions. I heard what happened. "Are you okay?" We never knew. That hurt more than anything, because it meant I had been invisible for a long time. One afternoon, I stood in front of a mirror and really looked at myself. The wrinkles, the gray hair, the tired eyes. And behind them all, strength. They had mistaken age for weakness. They had mistaken silence for ignorance. They had mistaken patience for surrender. Then the final message arrived. One short sentence. "They have all confessed." I sat down slowly. Not from relief. From weight. Because confessions change things forever. They remove all doubt. They remove all excuses. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. No fear. No listening. Just rest. But the lesson was not complete yet. Because now came the hardest part. Facing them again. Not in my house. Not in private. But in front of everyone. And what would be said there would decide whether greed truly loses. Or simply waits for another chance. The room was bigger than my living room. Colder too. Hard chairs. Bright lights. Long tables. This was not a place for comfort. This was a place for truth. I walked in slowly, supported by a cane I did not truly need but chose to carry. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted them to look at me the way they always had. As harmless. As small. As easy. They were already seated. All of them. When they saw me, their faces changed. Some looked away. Some stared. One glared. I took my seat and folded my hands neatly in my lap. The room filled with quiet tension. The serious voices began. They explained the process. The evidence. The order of speaking. I listened patiently. Then they called my name. I stood. Every sound in the room faded. This is my story, I began. And I am telling it because silence almost destroyed me. I spoke slowly. Clearly. Simply. I talked about the visits. The smiles. The fake concern. The way they spoke to me like I was already gone. I saw heads nodding. People understood. Then I told them about the suitcase. About being told I had no choice. About hearing plans made around me like I was furniture. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. That made it worse for them. When I described the documents, the room leaned forward. They believed I signed my life away, I said. What I actually signed was their reflection. Murmurs spread. I explained the conditions. The triggers. The moment greed exposed itself. That is when everything stopped, I said. Because greed always moves first. Then came the hard part. The threats. The whispers in the dark. The suggestion that things happen to old people. The room stiffened. Faces hardened. I felt anger ripple through the audience. Good. This was not just about me anymore. One by one, they were called to speak. Some cried. Some denied. Some blamed each other. One tried to laugh it off. That laughter did not last. Because the recordings were played. Voices echoed through the room. Words they thought were private now hung in the air. Permanent. Unforgiving. I watched them carefully. Not with anger. With clarity. This is who they were when they thought no one was listening. This is who greed turned them into. At the end, I was asked one final question. Do you have anything else to add? I stood again. Yes, I said. I turned toward them. You thought my age made me powerless, I said. But it gave me something you do not have. I paused. Time. Silence filled the room. The decision was not announced that day. But something more important happened. Control shifted. They were no longer the ones deciding what came next. As I left the room, someone stopped me. A reporter. Why did you fight so hard? They asked. I looked at them. Because if I didn't, I said, I would disappear quietly. That answer stayed with me. That night, I returned home. My home. The door opened easily. The lights came on. The house welcomed me back. But I knew something else now. The lesson I was teaching was bigger than them. It was for everyone watching. And the final step of that lesson would come from a place no one expected. A place that would make their greed collapse completely. That step comes next. And that is where this chapter must end. Chapter 9. The morning after the hearing felt unreal. I woke up in my own bed, in my own room, listening to birds outside my window. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Because now, the truth was no longer mine alone. It belonged to everyone. By midday, the phone would not stop ringing. Friends I had not heard from in years called me. Neighbors knocked on my door. Strangers sent messages. I heard your story. You were so brave. My grandmother went through something similar. I listened quietly. And with every call, I understood something important. This was never just about my house. It was about how easily people forget the value of the elderly once money enters the room. That afternoon, one of the serious voices came to see me again. They sat across from me, calm and respectful. There is something you should know, they said. I nodded. Tell me. They didn't just confess, they continued. They turned on each other. I raised my eyebrows slightly. When the pressure came, they said, they blamed one another. Each one tried to save themselves. I sighed. Greed does not build loyalty, I said. It eats it. They nodded. Then they told me the part that surprised even me. Because of what you did, they said, there will be changes. Changes? I asked. Yes, they replied. Your case exposed gaps, weak points, places where people like you are not protected enough. I leaned forward. What kind of changes? Stronger rules, clearer oversight, more checks before anyone can remove an elderly person from their home. My chest tightened, not from fear, from relief. So this won't happen as easily to someone else, I said. That's the goal, they replied. That evening, I sat alone in my living room. The suitcase was still there. I opened it. I took out my clothes and folded them properly, one by one, placing them back into my wardrobe. Each piece felt like a small victory. Then I pushed the empty suitcase into the corner. It would stay there. A reminder. Days passed. The story grew. People debated it, argued about it, learned from it. And then something unexpected happened. One of them asked to see me again. Not privately, publicly. They wanted to apologize. I thought about it for a long time. Finally, I agreed. They stood in front of cameras, hands shaking. I was wrong, they said. We were wrong. They spoke about fear, about greed, about regret. I stood beside them, silent. When they finished, all eyes turned to me. Do you forgive them? Someone asked. I took a deep breath. I forgive, I said slowly. But I do not forget. The room went quiet. Forgiveness frees me, I continued. Forgetting would endanger others. No one argued with that. That night, alone again, I sat by the window. I thought about everything that had happened. How close I had come to losing everything. How patience had saved me. How greed had exposed them. And how easily this story could have ended differently. I whispered to myself. They thought I was helpless. I smiled. They were wrong. But there was still one final decision left. One last move. A move that would seal the lesson forever. Not with punishment. Not with anger. But with power used the right way. That decision would be made next. And when it was made, no one would ever doubt me again. Power is quiet when it is real. It does not shout. It does not rush. It waits. That was what I learned in the days that followed. After the hearing, after the apologies, after the cameras stopped coming, people thought the story was almost over. They were wrong. Because this was the part no one expects. The part where a helpless old woman decides what to do with the power she has earned. The house was calm again. Too calm. I spent my mornings the same way I always had, watering the plants, sweeping the porch, sitting by the window with my tea. To anyone watching from outside, it looked like nothing had changed. But inside my mind, everything was moving. Slowly, carefully, deliberately. Greedy people think power is loud and fast. They never see quiet power coming. One afternoon, I received a thick envelope. No return address. Inside were documents, reports, statements, timelines. Everything that had been uncovered since the hearing. I read every page. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand how close I had come to disappearing. There were plans written down, dates circled, conversations summarized. One line made my hands shake. Once she's out, things will be easier. Out. Not relocated. Not helped. Out. Like an object. I closed the folder and sat very still. That was the moment I knew something important. If I simply walked away now, they would learn the wrong lesson. They would learn to be more careful next time. Not more human. The phone rang that evening. It was one of the serious voices. "We need to know what you want to do next," they said. I smiled to myself. "Why?" I asked. "Because," they replied, "you have more influence now than you realize." Influence. A word I had not been allowed to carry for a long time. "I want time," I said. They agreed. Over the next week, people came to see me. Quiet visits. Private conversations. Some came to thank me. Some came to confess. One woman held my hands and cried. "They tried to do this to my father," she said. "We didn't know how to stop it." I held her hands back. "You stop it by paying attention," I said. "And by not underestimating the quiet ones." She nodded through her tears. At night, I thought about them. The ones who had smiled at me while planning my removal. I did not feel anger anymore. I felt clarity. And clarity is dangerous when mixed with truth. Then I made a call. Not to authorities. Not to reporters. To someone else entirely. Someone who worked behind desks, not cameras. "I'm ready," I said. The voice on the other end paused. "Are you sure?" they asked. "Yes," I replied. "Very sure." "Once this starts," the voice said, "you can't control how big it becomes." I looked around my living room. At my walls. My memories. My life. "I controlled being silent for too long," I said. "This is different." There was a long pause. Then the voice said, "All right. We'll begin." The next day, something shifted. Not in my house. In the system. Files were reopened. Similar cases were reviewed. Patterns were noticed. People who thought their actions were small suddenly realized they were part of something much larger. And they were nervous. One of them called me that night. Their voice was shaking. "What are you doing?" they asked. I leaned back in my chair. "I'm living," I said calmly. "You promised not to ruin us," they said. I almost laughed. "I promised nothing," I replied. "You assumed." "You're going too far," they whispered. "No," I said softly. "I'm finally going far enough." The calls did not stop after that. Some angry. Some pleading. Some threatening. I recorded everything. Quiet power remembers. Then a message came that made my breath catch. "If this continues, names will come out." Names. That was what they were afraid of. Not justice. Exposure. I stared at the message for a long time. This was the turning point. The moment where I could step back. Or step forward and change things permanently. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the street was calm. Children played. Cars passed. Life continued. People had no idea how close silence comes to swallowing the vulnerable every day. I whispered to myself, "Not this time." I sent one final message. "Let them come out." When I put the phone down, my hands were steady. Because I knew what that meant. It meant the story was no longer about me. It meant greed was about to be dragged into the light in a way no apology could fix. And once that light turned on, there would be no hiding. What happens when the names are revealed? Who will fall first? And who will beg when they realize the helpless old woman they underestimated has become the one person they cannot control? The names came out on a quiet morning. No loud announcement. No dramatic warning. Just truth, released into the world. Reports were published. Records were opened. Patterns were shown clearly for anyone willing to see. What happened to me was not rare. It was repeated, planned, hidden behind smiles and care. And once the names were revealed, everything collapsed. Phones rang everywhere. Not in my house. In theirs. People who once felt untouchable were suddenly afraid to step outside. Friends stopped answering their calls. Support disappeared overnight. Because greed looks strong only in the dark. In the light, it shrivels. One by one they fell. Some lost positions. Some lost respect. Some lost everything they tried to steal from others. They begged. They apologized again. Not to me. To the world. And the world listened, then judged. I was asked one final time to speak publicly. I stood in front of people who looked at me differently now. Not as weak. Not as small. But as a warning. I am not special, I said calmly. I am just old enough to have seen this before. I paused. If you think age makes someone powerless, I continued, you have already underestimated them. Silence filled the room. This ends when we stop calling greed care, I said. And stop assuming quiet people know nothing. I stepped back. I was done speaking. When I returned home that evening, I sat in my favorite chair. The suitcase was gone. I had thrown it away that morning. I no longer needed reminders. Because the lesson was complete. They thought I was a helpless old woman. But I used their greed to teach them a lesson they will never forget. And I did it without shouting. Without violence. Without losing myself. Just patience. Preparation. And truth. Now, before this story ends, let me speak to you. If this story moved you. If it reminded you of someone you love. If it opened your eyes even a little. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this. And tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from? Your voice matters. Your presence matters. And remember this. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never mistake age for weakness. Because sometimes, the person everyone ignores is the one who teaches the hardest lesson. Thank you for watching.